Alright, thanks for tuning in to another video. So today I'm starting a new project. I'm going to be retrofitting this 1980 Camaro with a new Blueprint 383 stroker motor. I'm going to be adding the Holley Sniper 2 fuel injection system to this vehicle. So I completed the engine swap last fall. Came with a Holley 750 carburetor. Everything runs great, it works great. The problem being, just like any carburetor, especially on an engine like this with a little more radical cam, it really does not like to idle when it's cold. You really got to warm the car up. And once it's warm, it runs great. But I really like the benefit of being able to just turn the key and go. It's a really neat upgrade for older cars. And with the new Sniper 2 system, it looks like Holley has addressed some of the shortcomings with the first system. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, just real quick, about the overall system design, and then we're going to get right into it. So there's a couple different ways to do it. They advertise you can just hook up 4 wires and be ready to roll. It's a little more than that, but long story short, you can go with the full electronic ignition system from Holley, where the computer will have control over the timing advance and stuff like that. They offer a wiring kit for older cars. I'm not going to be using the timing control. I have a brand new, really good HEI distributor. I'm just going to be utilizing that. We will be adding an O2 sensor for the wide bed O2 sensor to the exhaust on the car. And then we need to put a coolant temperature sensor in. I'm going to be using this spot here. I had to get a different coolant outlet pipe. You can see it completely blocks the spot right here. And I was able to put my gauge sender here, but I want to be able to use this one. Additionally, there is one inside of the head here for coolant that I could have used as well. But I'm just able to get a slightly different neck for the water outlet here. That's going to allow me to use that. Also, basically, you got to make your battery connection. We're going to have our coolant temperature sensor. We're going to have the map sensor. All that is internal to the Sniper 2 throttle body. We've got our O2 sensor. And the next thing you got to think about is your fuel system. So there's 2 ways to do it. There's a return style system, which on the original Sniper, they had a regulator built in. Basically, you had to have 2 lines, one coming from the tank and then one going back to the tank. On older vehicles, that can be kind of hard to do because without drilling a hole in the top of your gas tank. On this 1980 Camaro, there is a vapor line that runs up the left side of the frame that I could have used as a return if I wanted. But there's pros and cons to both methods. When you run a return fuel system, basically the gas comes up from the rear, it gets whatever needed used in the fuel injection system, and then whatever is not needed is sent back to the gas tank and dumped. The problem with that is it circulates through the hot throttle body, it gets heated and gets put in the tank, and if you have a big enough pump, you're actually almost getting your gas to where it's boiling, which hurts performance and hurts the gas. So I'm going to go ahead and run a returnless system. And I decided to do this after reaching out to Holley and discussing all the options. You can run it that way. There's 2 fuel lines on the Sniper 2 I'll show you in a minute. And we're just going to plug one of them off. And then we're going to regulate everything from the back of the car. Alright, so this video is not necessarily specific to this car because the Blueprint 383 will go in obviously a bazillion different cars and everything's going to be similar. But like I said on the Camaro, we've got a line, 2 hard lines, one that runs from that vapor connection up there and then one that runs to the front on the passenger side, which is our feed line. So we're going to be utilizing the factory hard line with some fuel injection hose. And you can see I've got the gas tank removed. So on my car it's just 2 bolts and these tank straps come down, disconnect the fuel line, and then here is our tank. All right, so I took the tank down first because I wanted to see the condition of it. That was going to kind of determine what I needed to do with my fuel system. So believe it or not, there's a little bit of surface rust on the outside. The inside of the tank is perfectly clean. There's no sediment, there's no rust, there's nothing. It's perfect. So we're going to reuse this tank. So this is the vapor line. Actually is not in use in my setup because I have a vented gas cap. Alright, so here's the neat thing. Holley makes this whole kit. This is a drop-in sender and fuel pump for this Camaro gas tanks. This is for second gen, so through 1981 Camaro. And it will just go right in. They include a new lock ring, the O-ring, fuel hat, sock, whatever you want to call it. Everything that you need right here. And they offer kits for a bunch of different vehicles also. But what's nice about this kit is this is designed to be used with a returnless system. So you can, this automatically regulates the fuel pressure. It's like, I think it's 58 or 60 PSI, exactly what the Sniper 2 needs. It uses the factory hardline. You connect right to it. You're done. It's plug and play. Just a little bit of wiring back here. We'll have to run our wire, obviously, to our fuel pump. It's also got wiring that splices into your factory fuel gauge connection and outputs the same value as like a factory sender. Now what some other people do is they will run an inline pump in the back here into something that's called a Corvette regulator. Basically it's a fuel filter that has a regulator built in that has a return back here at the back of the car. So that's another option. A lot of people do that with LS swap vehicles. I thought about that, and I thought about using an external fuel pump, but everyone knows that an external fuel pump is not as ideal as an internal fuel pump because when it's submerged in the gasoline, that actually keeps the fuel pump cool and makes it last longer. It ends up working a lot better. So it's actually not that much more expensive to do this. When I looked at it, when you buy the Sniper 2 without the external fuel pump, like the whole master fuel line kit, and you do this, it's only a couple $100 more to have the in-tank set up. So to me, it was really worth it. So obviously the first step, drop the tank. I'm gonna get the stuff that I need to do under the car first, like the oxidizer sensor bung welded in, and get my fuel pump put in. All right, so to give you an idea of what all is needed for this, in my case, we need a small block Chevy fuel pump block off plate because I'm getting rid of the mechanically driven pump off the engine. Some fuel injection specific hose clamps. These are the 3/8 inch vapor guard. We'll need some fuel injection compatible 3/8 hose. So again, I'm using this vapor guard fuel line. It's kind of expensive, but it's supposed to be the best you can get. Need a fuel injection specific fuel filter. There's a couple different styles to use. I went with this one. It's a Holley 562-1 because it's a little more OEM style, larger, and I don't think it'll plug up as fast as some of the smaller ones. Obviously here is the main piece. It's got 4 100-pound injectors inside, map sensor, everything else it needs as far as sensor wise. You see on the Sniper 2 they moved the electronics to the side and it's supposed to be shielded better. A lot of people were having interference problems with the original Sniper kit. We've got our wideband O2 sensor, gaskets, all this stuff comes with the kit. It does come with an oxygen sensor, a plate, so you can drill a hole and then just bolt this plate. There's a gasket to the exhaust if you want. Here's our coolant temp sensor. Here's our handheld programming computer that is what runs all that, kind of the brains of it. I bought this piece here. This is to hold the fuel filter. I mount this under the back of the car here. Wiring harnesses that you'll need. I'm going to clean up this kind of like mounting area here. says you're supposed to take the fuel level sender off to install this. Let's see if I can do it without it. Be careful when you're trying to shove this. Yeah, there's pretty much no way that's going to go in without taking it off. So there's 2 screws on the side here I need to take out. So now you got to get this tucked in there. Back on. Alright, now I should get everything down in there. So it has alignment tabs, so you know exactly where to put it. Right. Get it in position. And then since we're working around a fuel tank with fuel vapors, you don't just want to start cracking metal to metal with a hammer. Just make sure you have either brass tools or some kind of other, plastic tool, not just a metal screwdriver, when we hammer the lock ring in place here. Alright, so you want to get it to where the lock rings are engaged at their highest point, like that. You can see the tank line looks just like the factory line that came off of here. Alright, so in the factory kit they do include the fuel pump relay as part of the main harness, and they do include quite a bit of this looks like 14 gauge, this blue wire, which is for the fuel pump. Alright, so depending on the vehicle that you're doing this on, or if it's Camaro like this one, you have to determine where we want the fuel filter. So it's kind of large. So when I was looking back here, there's not a really great place for it back here. I mean, I could probably make something work here, but I was looking up here, and on the frame rail there's this piece of old rubber line connects the front to the rear fuel line. And then we also have to think about our oxygen sensor, where we want to put it on the exhaust. So like I said, there's the plate they give you. Now you have to make sure your oxygen sensor cannot be, coming from below or even the side. It has to be at an angle coming from the top. So about a 45-degree angle on the exhaust. It could be on either side. Just have to have it on one. So I'm just looking over here. This seems like a pretty good spot for it. Just in after the collector. And you could even move it back here. You just have to make sure that it's 18 inches away from the outlet of the exhaust, which we don't have to worry about since we have a full exhaust on it here. So somewhere, preferably that the wiring will reach, but if we have to extend the wiring, it's not that big of a deal. But I'm probably gonna go ahead and just drop the car down and start looking at where I wanna mount the harnesses and stuff under the hood before I get going too crazy under here, then I'll lift it back up. And so under the hood, we're gonna have to remove the carburetors. In this case, like I said, 750, 4150 style double pumper carb. We'll get that taken off of here. I've got that water outlet installed, so I did just drain the coolant enough to where it was below this level here. So I can go ahead and remove this brass plug as well and get the ECT temperature sensor installed there. In my case, I had a manual choke carburetor, so I'll be removing all the choke components since we won't need that anymore. I'll probably use the hole that went through the firewall for the cable pass-through for the electronic control module for the screen. Then over here, I'm going to disconnect the factory fuel line. So in my case, it just ran out of this fuel pump up through this filter. You can see through this 3/8 inch hose into this dual feed here. So I'm just going to be removing all of this when I take the carburetor off. Alright, so it's not, this throttle body, just the way it's set up, is not exactly the same as the Holley carburetor I took off. So this right here, I'd have to modify this bracket with my low car kick down cable, throttle cable to fit, which I could do. Also happen to have this called Easy EFI bracket, and I'll have links to all this stuff in the description. This is meant to go like this. Then it's got multiple different adapters that will screw to the top of it. So I might use that because that will work pretty good on here. Alright, so back under the car, get the blue wire for the fuel pump. They give you plenty of that, so that should be enough. I'll have to put it in some protective tubing, run it down the passenger side. Then the oxygen sensor, again, they give you plenty of wire, and I think I want to put it, I said within 1 to 10 inches of that collector. There's something right here. Be a really good spot for it. So I'm going to need to drill a hole to weld my bung to. So now I got to see if I can get the drill in here at the right angle. Alright, so here's what oxygen sensor looks like all installed. Like I said, I just used what they gave me. I guess there's a gasket here. I guess if it ever leaks, I'll just weld it up, but it looks like it's pretty good. Okay, so considering where I want to put the fuel filter, I decided not to use this spot here because there's just not enough room, and I don't want to have to modify these lines because they are under kind of high pressure, so you really do need to have them flared correctly. So I'm just going to put a piece of fuel injection hose between here and here, a couple of fuel injection clamps. So I decided to put it back here. What I did is, so the fuel flow is this way, so it will come out of the tank, go into the filter, go here, and then I've got a couple clamps here I'm going to put on, and then it goes into the factory hard line and up to the front of the car. Alright, so when I had got the fuel tank put back up in place, so you can see there's the new line because the factory routing. So here's where I ended up putting the fuel filter. Fits just on the frame rail there. You can see it's kind of a pain getting in there. Then I just reconnected that vapor line, even though it's really not being used. I should be able to pull that filter out of there just from the back here whenever I need to change it, but if not, it's not that hard to drop the tank. It's 2 bolts. So here's the wiring. So I took the factory fuel cylinder and soldered and heat shrinked to the purple line. And the gray line hooks up to the blue wire. It runs from the front, but I gotta get that all put up along the frame. And then both grounds, I just cleaned off a spot that was where the factory ground was. I removed it, put a new stainless screw in there, and I ground it down to bare metal and soldered the connector. So that'll be the ground for the fuel pump and the fuel gauge. The black with the white stripe and the black. Alright, so I've got where the wire comes down. You could run it inside the car. I just chose to run it along the fuel line. I got the new fuel injection hose and a little cross piece here. So that's just zip tied and putting the loom all the way to the back of the car. And then back here, I kind of zip tied the harness up after I plugged it in for the fuel tank. Alright, so under the hood, I went ahead and got the coolant temperature sensor installed. Had to use a 1/2 to 3/8 reducer bushing. Then this is a 3/8 NPT. Got the wire running back behind here. Got the coolant top back off. So now I'm gonna have to go ahead and just figure out how I want to get the wiring situated here. So we got this yellow line that's going to be connected to the tach connection, and obviously we need a switched ignition that stays powered when you're cranking the car, and then you need to connect the red and black power. I say to connect it directly to the battery, so that's what I'm going to do. I've got a fuel pump relay and the main fuse screwed to the firewall here. So now I just need to, where the choke cable came through, I'm going to enlarge that hole, put a grommet, and then that's probably where I'll run my ignition wire out. And then I'm going to run the handheld controller wiring in through that hole so I can have the controller inside. So obviously I'm just using a standard GM style HEI coil and distributor. And right now it just has a power wire going to it, and I did have a female fitting that I made for the tach in the car. I decided I'm going to upgrade that a little bit because I never really like how it fits. This is a standard GM style connector. The red wire is plus 12 volts, obviously, for the coil and the distributor. And the green wire is the tach. So I'm going to split the green wire to that yellow wire for the input. All right, so under the dash on this 80 Camaro, the fuse panel, there's just a spot that says ignition, very plain as day. So I ran a wire from that spot out through the firewall here. That connects to the pink wire on the Holley system. Now to hook up the tachometer, I said I was going to split it, but what I did is I hooked the yellow tachometer input from the coil, the green wire coming out of the coil negative here, which is the tach output on this HEI distributor. And then there's a tach output on the Holley system to go in the car. It's a gray wire on the auxiliary harness, so I just hooked that into the wire that already was coming out from in the car to go to the tachometer. Get everything kind of zip tied out of the way, and I've got the main power harness running right here. Just put it in the split loom, then it's connected directly to the battery. As far as the fuel line goes, I've got all those clamps tight. Obviously it hooks to the factory hard line, fuel injection clamp, it runs up and it stops right here. I used these this 90-degree AN fitting for here, and then I used a AN cap for back here. It doesn't matter which side you hook it to, they're connected internally. So since we're not having a return or a regulator, external regulator, we're just going to dead end this right into here. But while I prime the fuel system, I'm going to leave this disconnected and put it into a gas can. That way I can just get fuel up here first thing. I'm ready to do that. Everything's hooked up. I'm just going to put gas in the tank, I'm going to prime the pump a few times, put the car up on the lift, and look for any fuel leaks underneath, just to make sure we don't have any. And then we'll be ready to fire this thing up. Alright, so I've got the ignition key turned forward. Let me see. It's not ready to start. We need to run the wizard. So this is the first screen. Select the Sniper TBI type. So obviously it's Sniper 2. Select the number of cylinders. It's probably hard for you to see on there. So we're going to select 8 cylinders. Next. Now once the engine displacement. Alright, so I've got the displacement set. Target idle speed. Change that to about 800. Well, start with 850 and see how it is. We can always change it later. Alright, so it's asking the cam type. Stock, mild, street strip, or race. This one's street strip. It's about how much vacuum you have. So this one has a shortage of vacuum, but it's not an all-out race cam. Power adder, none. RPM to Sniper. So all we're doing is connecting the coil negative for attack. We're not doing any of the Hyperspark or Holley dual sync distributor or anything like that. So we'll select coil negative. Maybe. Okay, start. I hear the fuel pump running. So now we're gonna go ahead and prime the fuel. Alright, so primed it a couple times. Got the fuel up to the front. So far no leaks. Went ahead and hooked this up. Just primed it. No leaks up here. So now I'm gonna put it up on the left and just double check. Alright, so it says obviously after initial power up, we're gonna check to make sure all the sensors are connected correctly. So we'll turn it on now. Okay, we'll click the monitor icon. Monitors. Initial startup. So TPS is 0. So as I push my foot down on the gas pedal, you'll see it move. It should be close to between 85 and 100%. So I've got it to 96% with my foot all the way down to the floor. Shows your map sensor, the CTS, which would be about ambient temperature right now, 80. IAC position is 69, battery 12.4 volts. So you need a 12 volt minimum. Map sensor should read between, it says 95 and 102. And at high elevations as low as 75. Obviously. But what we're going to do now is we're actually going to try to start the car for the first time. And then what we want to do is make sure that it's reading the RPMs and that it runs. Obviously, it being running will show that it's working. Idle's a little low. Alright, so kind of just like a carburetor. There's the idle screw here and it goes backed all the way out. Hold on. Okay. Up. It's operating temperature. Thermostat's 180 on this. 180. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start the car up. Alright, so I had one little fuel leak here, so I just snugged that up a little bit. It is up to 180 degrees now. Alright, so what we're going to do, go into the menu here, and we're going to click Learn. You can see it says Fuel Learn Status Learning, Current Learn negative 22%, Closed Loop Compensation, Target Air Fuel Ratio is 13.5, and current air fuel ratio is listed below that. So it's just trying to maintain the idle right now. Good. So they say not to set your idle until the vehicle is warmed up, but it wouldn't even stay running, so I just had to open the throttle plate just a little bit. So our IAC is down at like 2%, which is good. It means it's not using the idle air control to keep the car running. Alright, so let's go for our first ride. We'll go get gas, let the car continue to learn. So far the throttle response is real good. It feels just like a carburetor, honestly. So far so good, it is running nice. Really there's nothing obviously wrong with the carburetor once it warmed up, so it's running just like it. The throttle response is really good though. Got the kick down adjusted just right, so it pulls down to second immediately. So there's a lot of neat stuff it looks like this can do as far as like different gauges you can monitor. I kind of like this vital screen here. Yeah, so I'm almost done with the first drive. Hopefully we've learned enough data. As long as we have, I will save the base tables. That way this becomes kind of like the default setting that it's learned here for idle. It's important to do that because if you develop a issue with the car, so like one of the sensors goes bad or you get like an exhaust leak or something like that, you don't want the car to learn bad values. So we're assuming that everything is mechanically working correctly now, and the values that we've learned to make it run are going to become our new base, open loop type values. So I'll show you how we do that when we get back. Alright, so back on first drive, just kind of fine tuning the idle. 800 seems to be pretty good. So I'm not really ready to set the base tune to save it yet because I don't think it's really learned everything it needs to learn. It still says it's learning different categories. So the closer it gets to closed loop compensation 0, it means it's pretty much learned that area, but you want to have it close to 0 in multiple, like when you're accelerating from a stop. It helps to have somebody kind of go with you on a drive. But I will show you real quick how you would save that. So we'd go basically to the home screen, click tuning, click advanced, close the loop. So this first one here, close the loop limit, click save. To learn. smooth the fuel table with learned values. So this is where we click OK once we're ready to go, and that will set base fuel table. But like I said, I'm not ready to do that yet. And then the last thing you do, you can save the calibration. Alright, so you would go back to the main screen here, hit File, and with the Sniper EFI config, and then we would click Download from ECU. That would save it on the little SD card that comes installed in the screen. That's just saving your base calibration. That way if there's a problem, you can reload that and run from that. Alright, so I think we're going to wrap up the video there. Hopefully it was helpful to show you how, I guess, relatively easy it is to install this Sniper 2 setup on this new Blueprint 383 Chevy engine. Just a little time consuming, especially if you don't have a lift, you know, putting the car up and taking the gas tank off and doing all that. And like I said, there's multiple options for how to do your fuel system. Just kind of depends on the car that you're working on. I really like the in-tank fuel pump though. It's nice and quiet. Fuel gauge works perfect. Once I filled up with gas, I went right to 100%. I can kind of see that the old fuel gauge or float was not working that great, because since I had around a quarter of a tank, and this one was more like 1/8 of a tank, but which is a little more accurate. But again, like I said, I'll have links in the description to everything that I used on this setup. And if you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them below. Thanks for watching as always. Be sure to like and subscribe, and until next time, we'll see you later.